All right, today I'm going to talk about the principles of good technique, starting with the position at the keyboard, of course. And what we want is a nice, comfortable, relaxed position. We want to sit on the front of the bench so that our body can easily move from side to side. And when we bring our arms up to the keys, I like to start with a level position and not going down into the keys like this and pushing. Our basic movements are going to be pulling the tone out of the piano. The elbows hang. The elbows do not work on their own. That brings tension. So we always have to be aware of that. And I have my students do this, and make it as tight as you can, and then relax. We don't play the piano with our fingers. The fingers touch the keys, yes, but we play using the entire mechanism. And everything has to be integrated. And anywhere you have tension along the way, all the way up to the top of your shoulders and your upper chest, that's a roadblock to being able to get your arm weight into the keys. All right, we want a natural shape of the hand, and we don't want this the knuckle of the second finger to be high like this. And the fingers have to all work with the same movement. And so we start with some very careful exercises to work on that. Sometimes you see a student playing along and doing something like this. Well, you're making a different movement, and you have to be able to control the touch evenly, and so you need to do the same thing for every note. It's the hand joint that the lever starts from. And the other joints of the finger are simply raised from there, like little hammers. All right, position in general. No arch. We don't think in terms of arch, even though pretty recently people have written about an arch. And the reason that doesn't work is because technique is about movement, not about position. Movement, not position. An arch closes your hand, brings your fingers in. So how can you play a large chord if you're thinking in terms of that? Well, you can't. The fingers obviously are going to be flatter as you're reaching for larger chords. All right, that being said, there are sometimes very good reasons for having what we may call a traditional hand position with the fingers curved. The thumb at level. If you're playing scales, for instance, that have a lot of black keys, curved fingers make a lot of sense. And of course, as you know, all of our fingering patterns for scales put the thumbs on the white keys, not on the black keys. All right, so our thumb is lower and further in. So it makes a lot of sense to have nice curved fingers for that type of playing. All right, so our fingertips need to support our arm weight. We need to strengthen our fingers by doing the right kind of technical exercises. They're going to support a lot of weight. The fingers are not equal. The keyboard wasn't arranged for the human hand, right? Because our fingers are all different lengths. Okay? So we have to somehow account for that, and having some curve in the fingers is one way to do it. And especially when you need to pass your thumb under or your fingers over your thumbs. All right. So your fingers are also not the same strength, and they'll never be. In terms of the anatomy, the fourth finger is not as independent as the other fingers. Why is that? That's because if you look at the anatomy, there is a tendon which comes from the third finger to the fourth finger, and there's also one that comes from the fifth finger to the fourth. So fourth finger, you're never going to be able to lift as far as the others, but we don't need to. Before people understood this in earlier parts of the 19th century, pianists actually had operations to try to separate those tendons and to be able to stretch further. And most notably, Robert Schumann ruined his concert career by using a mechanical device to try to exercise the fourth finger, and he had to rely on his wife Clara, who was a fabulous pianist, to premiere his works. All right, so how do we equalize? It's the arm work weight that equalizes into the key. So we use the same arm weight for each note. So how do we work at strengthening the fingers? Well, we have lots of exercises for that. The first thing to mention is that the fingers, when you're playing, stay at the key level. We do some finger articulation exercises. I'll mention that in a minute. They stay at the key level. They don't attack the key from above. That's wasted motion, and it's going to cause tenseness. So, very close to the keys. And when we're doing finger exercises, we do need a little bit of a finger stroke and pressing firmly to the key to work on strengthening. So we have muscles through our hand, and the termination of muscles, and this is anywhere in your body, is tendons. So these muscles turn into tendons in the fingers proper. And you can not just strengthen your muscles, but you strengthen your tendons also by doing good technical exercises. All right. The wrist. It's the most important joint to be relaxed and used in the course of playing. And many exercises we exaggerate when we start to fill the relaxation and to make sure we're transferring our arm weight through to the key. So we're not starting with fingers up. Fingers stay on the keys. And we do exercises like this. Right? Gradually, as we get more advanced, we internalize most of that movement. So we don't see it as a big movement, but we're doing inside exactly the same thing. We're relaxing here, and we're using our arm weight. All right, so let's talk about the thumb for a minute. It's important that the thumb gain flexibility and independence. You use the thumb by lifting it from the hand joint just like you do the other fingers, and you never do this. This is not using your thumb. This is using your wrist and arm to play the thumb. And you have to have the same attack with the thumb as the other fingers in order for it to be equal. All right, flexibility. When we're learning, we have to be able to play evenly, and our thumb is part of that. And we're going to play legato, and the thumb is going to move under the hand and be ready to play the next note. All So when you practice arpeggios, scales and arpeggios, that's the way we want to be thinking. When we get more advanced and we're playing literature, that connection sometimes goes away. You lift because you're moving, okay? And so there's actually a little break there. But I think if you don't learn to play legato when you start and develop your thumb flexibility, then you're going to have problems later on. Okay. Physics, how the piano works. As you know, the piano has a very complicated mechanism, and it's designed that way so that you can play loud and fast and have good control. You have to play evenly to the bottom of the key. You can easily play the piano and not have any note sound. Now, I'm defeating the action here because I'm not pressing steadily to the bottom. The only thing that we have control over is the speed with which the hammer hits the strings. So, if we press slowly, we get a soft tone. If we press quickly, we get a loud tone. And once again, remember, I'm not using my finger. I'm not getting that loud tone by using my finger. It's coming from everywhere else. All right, so that's what we have control of. When you play softly, you don't play lightly. You don't press lightly. You still press firmly and evenly to the bottom. And then your note's always going to sound. Okay? If you try to depress lightly and don't go all the way to the bottom, that's what happens. We end up with notes that don't sound. All right, so that's a very important thing to think about. All right, now let's talk about having to do with basic finger stroke. And I accuse students of having lazy fingers sometimes. And what I mean by that is that their previous finger doesn't come out of the key when they play the next. And there should be no reason for that. You play the stroke, and then you completely relax your finger. You do not lift your finger out of the key. You simply relax. And why is my finger coming up? It's because the action is pushing it up. At the bottom of the stroke, I've completely relaxed. And my finger returns to the surface. I'm ready to go on to something else. A good thing to practice is to play into the key and see how short of a note you can play. Very important. All right, just a word about staccato. Staccato simply means short. Maybe when we're teaching youngsters, we say that, well, if you see a staccato dot on a note, play it half the length. That, of course, is an oversimplification. It depends on the piece. It depends on the tempo. It depends on the style of the piece. Those things determine how long a staccato dot lasts. And of course, there's plenty of music that has half notes and quarter notes and eighth notes in different places in the piece, and they all have staccato dots. You don't play them the same length. You play the longer notes longer and the shorter ones shorter. Okay, so a very general thing. How do we play staccato? You play short. The old way, still talked about in some sources, is to play from the wrist to play staccato. This is completely a waste of motion and dangerous also. If you let your fingers come above the keys, you're more likely to miss notes. Okay? So there doesn't need to be any other kind of movement involved. It's simply your normal playing stroke, but you're relaxing the key quicker. You're letting go of the note quicker, depending on, again, the situation that you're in at a particular time. If you are playing passages that are loud and have long sustained notes, the stroke is still very quick, and you don't hold the tension. You don't do this. You only leave enough tension to keep the keys down. And then you're completely relaxed and ready to move on to the next note. Completely relaxed. And you keep moving your wrist a little bit to make sure that it stays relaxed as you go along. All right. What we want to do with our technique is we want to do the movements that result in the music that we're looking for, the musical effect, the musical sound. The most basic musical gesture would be the two-note slur. And all of the beginning method books for children now have exercises for playing a two-note slur, which is a great thing. All right, in general, with a two-note slur, it's the first note that gets the emphasis. The second note can be a little lighter and a little bit shorter. So we want the stronger movement for the first note of the slur. And the stronger movement is down. This is your strongest movement. And then the second note is an up motion. So down, up, or down, release. And you play a series of slurs like this. So that's the musical sound that we want, and now we know exactly what we're doing with it physically. All right. Now let's talk about the wrist some more and different movements that we use for the wrist. First of all, we have the concept of elastic hand. Well, what does that mean? That means that when you don't have to have your hand in an expanded position, you relax. You let the fingers come together, you relax the wrist. You don't leave your fingers tight and extended and let your wrist get tight. So you always want to think of that relaxation, no matter what kind of passage you're on. Now, the other thing is, the next movement of the wrist is what we call side motion. And I'm moving my wrist from side to side, and my hand is moving along with it, and the fingers. The wrist is guiding the way. And we do this in passages where we have stretches, so that the note that's playing is in line with the mechanism. You're not reaching like this to play the note. You're here, and you're moving your hand with the pattern. See, part of that is the relaxation, the elastic hand again. All right, so this is important in all kinds of passages, to be behind the mechanism and to not stretch when you don't have to. All right, so that's side motion. Then we have rotation. And a rotation is using the wrist from side to side, and from the forearm forward is a single unit. So in other words, we're playing with larger muscles. We're not playing with the fingers. And the groupings depend on the piece and how the music is laid out. Right. But notice that I'm not doing this. I'm not lifting off the keys. The rotation is from within my wrist, and my fingers are relaxed, so they stay at the top of the key. Most famous example rotation, probably the Pathetique Sonata, where you have to play those broken octaves for quite a period of time. And the way to approach something like that is to make sure you have your rotation. And since it's a fast tempo, you want to always have your wrist moving at the same time in a grouping of some sort, and not tension, not fingers, not wrist tension, back and forth, and this is ensuring that you're staying relaxed here. All right, so that's rotation. We use that in a lot of passages. All right. Now, we of course have combinations of movements, and we have one that we call a circular movement, and it may be for classical music where you have a broken pattern, and we're not playing with the fingers, but we're letting our wrist shape the pattern. The first note is usually the most important, so it gets a little bit of emphasis. So we're doing a circular motion. And we do other combination motions depending, once again, on the music that we're working with. Okay. Do you have any questions?
When you're doing the thumb underneath,
Mm-hmm.
you know, a scale or whatever,
Yes.
do you also, in the slow motion, work on the shifting of the weight as you, like, let's say as you're approaching the thumb, and then as it crosses over, that the hand is shifting on it?
Yes, and there is, when you play a scale, there is some wrist and hand movement, small movements like this as you go along, right? We're not trying to hold our hand in place rigidly. So you can see that my hand is free and it's moving. And I'm into the keys, and I'm not lifting my fingers above the keys. That's tension, it's wasted motion. There are plenty of pianists who have mannerisms where they're lifting things. And I'll admit to some mannerisms myself. But if you look closely at people playing, they usually aren't striking the keys from above, but they're making a movement after their technique has already done its work, and it's no longer part of the technique that we're dealing with.
I have a question.
Sure.
On the thumb, so in this method, you're advocating the thumb playing more or less flat rather than slightly at an angle?
It's on its side.
More on the side.
Like this,
Mm-hmm.
right? Up and down like this. It's making the same general type of movement as the other fingers are making.
So because the thumb is shorter, in some technique, or I just recently started doing this, rather than playing on the side of the thumb, more on sort of like at that angle, to compensate for the corner.
method books
Yeah.
call it the
Like
corner.
this?
And for the little kids, I mean, I say on your corner at least 12 times a day,
Right.
because
But they're flat, and then when they go
they're
flat,
down
their
here.
hand goes flat.
Yes.
But
Yes.
I'm seeing that you're not compensating. You're not compensating the thumb, treating that any differently than the fingers.
Yeah.
Or is it again a case of everyone's hands a little bit different shape?
Everyone's
and
hand's a little
length
bit different, and with children, small muscle development comes at different times with children, and sometimes you have to let them start out by playing with caved-in fingers. They don't have the strength to do it yet, but eventually they get stronger. And another point there is that we never let our finger cave in at any of the finger joints. Okay? Never go backwards. I don't even attempt to demonstrate that anymore because my tendons don't want to do that, and because they're used to.
And the little hands, I call it, they buckle backwards.
Yes, they buckle backwards, and that's not good because you're getting a different touch that way.
So what about our double jointed friends?
A double jointed is having too much space at your joints. I mean, the name is a misnomer. It's not a double joint. But sometimes you do have to make accommodations for them. Someone who's double jointed can learn to play very well, but you're going to have to accept different motions in some cases.
As an example,
because of that.
I have long fingers, completely double jointed, and when she was doing that on the pathétique, this joint, I can't even do it. This joint completely collapses in like this, and then her hand is like, it locks.
Right.
And I don't know how to help her.
And she's unable to keep it extended.
Because the finger double joint's one thing, but the thumb is just...
I don't have enough experience with that to tell you how far a particular student can go in terms of strengthening the mechanism and overcoming
Because
that.
I wondered with the thumb,
It's gonna be
we should
different
be
with
able to
everyone.
strengthen it somehow.
Yes, you would think so. But if there's extra spaces at those joints, they want to bend in different ways.
I have a question.
Yes.
On the staccato again, would you still recommend playing all the way to the bottom of the key bed?
Yes. Always to the bottom of the key bed. You're never surfacing. It's the only way to ensure that the action is going to do what you want it to do. Right? If you play all the way to the bottom. You can play quickly. You can play quickly and to the bottom and play very, very short notes. I mean, that's no problem. All right. One other thing about position at the keys that I should mention is your position on the keyboard relative to how close to the fall board you are. I see students who are reaching in and twisting the wrist, and if they would stay in the keys further, you wouldn't need any side motion to reach those patterns. Now, I understand that there are a few people out there who have wide enough fingers that they have a little problem with that. Okay? Because I have come across that with some students. So you have to accommodate however you can. Sometimes you have to play closer out. But in general, you don't want this all the time. That's a detour. Right? That's a detour that you're taking, and as we all know, the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. Okay? All right, and so even when we have large intervals, we want to stay close to the keyboard. Sometimes we do make a little bit of an arc when we're reaching, okay? And our fingers are off the keys anyway, but we don't want big movements. We want to be as economical as possible when we do that, and as relaxed as possible.
The further you play in toward the fall board, though, the more strength it requires to get the same sound.
That's a good point.
Because you're closer to the fulcrum.
From a piano technician. That's exactly right. It is. You're closer to the center of the lever, right?
Fulcrum.
I have not found that that's much of a problem, okay? It's certainly true. but I don't think that you're exaggerating enough to make it that much harder. And of course, you have different lengths of levers for the black and white keys.
Right, but they adjust the fulcrum on the sharps to accommodate that. So.
Right.
It'd have to be extreme, that you'd have to be way in here, that makes it,
I think if your technique is good and you're into the key and you're relaxed, I think whether you have a piano that has a very hard touch or a very light touch doesn't make a whole lot of difference. Okay? I like a firm touch, but even if it's a light touch, you're playing deep into the keys. And of course, sometimes having a piano with a firm touch is really good to practice with.
Build more fingers.
To have to work. Although, of course, you have to make sure that you stay relaxed as you do that. If you're playing on a piano that's heavy. When I was younger, I used to take a blanket and actually stuff it up under the piano between the beams and the soundboard, and to actually mute it and then close the whole piano up and play like that to really feel like I'm working. And then in a normal situation, things seem easy.
yeah.
Okay, so that's an introduction to the different aspects of playing, and we'll see where we go from here.
Very good.
Okay? Sheesh.
Let me shut that on.
Yeah.
So will you let us
Just push that button.
play a few of those
This one?
early exercises?
Yes, I will.